So, hello, I'm Amy Lasack. I'm the Vice President of Business and Community Solutions at Northeast Iowa Community College. And today I have the opportunity to speak to two of our best trainers, Paulette Milewski and Michael Leytem. Thank you very much to both of you for joining. Really appreciate that. We're going to be talking today about one of my favorite and most impactful solutions that we offer individuals and companies. That's professional coaching. So as we get started, I'm going to just throw that first question out there to both of you. How do you describe what professional coaching is? Michael, can we start with you?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Amy. Really appreciate being here. Yeah, coaching. I think sometimes it's a term that people maybe growing up, had a coach in sports or something like that. But when it comes to executive coaching, I really think of it as guidance and support. I think of it as something that's not a silver bullet, but it's something that can help individuals discover kind of the solutions and the answers from within them. And I also think that it's important that it's temporary, that you have kind of something in mind at the front and you try to achieve that goal, help that individual achieve that goal, and then they have to kind of take it from there. So those are a couple ways I like to describe it.
Mhm.
Thank you. Paulette, what are your thoughts?
Yes, thanks. That was a great kickoff. I think some words that come to mind for me that I would add to that is collaborative, self-directed. Um, I also think it's about positivity and growth. I think there was a time in professional coaching where it was more discipline and corrective action, and that's not the space that I'm working in. It is in this fast-paced world of people having a million ways to be reached in a day, fax, phone, video, walk-ins, email, instant message, texting. It's just how do we really stay focused on what our goals are and where we are headed and what do we need to get there and what's getting in our way. So I think it's really a collaborative of and different for every individual. It's in my experience been tailored.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you both brought up two big points that I always hear about is when somebody hears coaching, they think sports. And then they think, oh, this person's in trouble, so they're assigning me. So how do you break that misconception and what type of people are the type of people that you feel like are ready for a coaching session or couple sessions with each of you?
So actually, I still have some coaches that kind of fall on both ends of the spectrum. So you can think of coaching kind of as a high potential, and that's kind of more of the positive. I mean, they're all collaborative, but it's trying to get them from point A to point B and really preparing them for future success and future roles. And then I do still have some that are on more of the disciplinary side of things where, there's major issues here. We don't want to let this person go. We care about them. We think that they can still, solve some of these problems, but we know that they need an outside perspective. I will tell you as a coach personally, I prefer the former. I mean, it's a different, more positive type of an experience versus when the temperature is kind of cranked up with the disciplinary piece. But in both realms, you're helping that individual and you're helping them arrive at a better place, hopefully at the end of the coaching. I think one other thought here, and I'll kick it over to Paulette. I think sometimes with coaching, people think it's kind of this fluffy thing, right? Because many people don't have experience with it. And so they
Mhm.
think coaching is like, oh, you're giving someone a pat on the back or something like that. But really, the tools and frameworks that we use are grounded in research and science, and it's really about behavioral change. So using a lot of psychological components and leadership frameworks that have been studied for a long time. And it is important on the back end then, to leave some clear action plans and ways to measure and evaluate the coaching, which is sometimes really difficult to do. But just so people, if it's the first time hearing about coaching and thinking about it, it's not just someone giving you a pep talk, to make you feel better. It's actually grounded in some really good stuff.
Yeah, that really resonates with me because it's definitely about that self-insight and that self-awareness and that discovery and growth.
Mm.
And it comes through asking some pretty tough questions sometimes in a really safe space, a trusted, confidential space. So that's what makes it a little easier. But yeah, there's definitely some, hmm, hadn't thought about that. Thanks for pointing out my blind spot moments, of insight. And in terms of launching it, I think for me, it's been inviting people to really think about what do you want to get out of this? Where do you see yourself? Some of those dream questions. And really, if they're referred, so maybe it's a supervisor that's referring them, what are the behaviors, the observable, measurable things that you can see in terms of actions and behavior, like Michael said,
Mhm.
that we want to move the needle on? Because we can talk about mindset, but it's hard to measure mindset, right? Whereas if I am coaching, let's say, a salesperson, we know what their revenue and income generated is at the start, and we can evaluate it at the end and see, did some of these skills and techniques around sales help them, increase their relationships with customers?
That's great. So for those that maybe haven't seen coaching concretely in front of them, haven't been something that they've ever really experienced. Do you have any examples of what that has looked like success-wise, without giving too many details or names for somebody that you work with, on what sort of things did coaching involve that people found successful?
I think so. I kind of thought of four buckets that came to mind for me. So there's those that have their eye on their career path and through coaching have accepted some promotions, right? So there's that leadership piece. Then there's the emerging leader or the high potential, where I have seen people coming in and this is my first time in this job, and I'm now supervising what were peers. So we talk about how to excel and develop our leadership style. Then I've also worked with a lot of sales professionals and coached that. And then the fourth bucket, what was my fourth bucket? Executive, executive leadership, which I think a lot of times that's the safe space of confidentiality is very helpful because it can be lonely at the top, as we've heard, so maybe. And so I think that in those instances, it can vary maybe more from session to session. Whereas with an emerging leader, we kind of have a path we're moving along, or with sales. And big things happen in decision making and change. And so I think that also is a little representative of some of the executive coaching I've seen is, okay, well, we talked about that last week. What's on your mind and heart this week?
Mm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'll use your framework, Paulette. So I'll give an example of an executive and then an emerging leader. So an executive example that I had the opportunity to be the coach for were actually two executives at the same time. So it was a president and a vice president of a company. Over time, their relationship had kind of started to splinter a little bit. I mean, they were still very cordial, but just not working as a strategic partnership. And I worked with them both one-on-one to kind of help them discover what they needed to do to be better leaders themselves. But then I also brought them together for some, two-on-one type sessions, if you will. And we asked some really difficult questions, and they had to put in the time and effort and show some vulnerability. And then coming out of that, they made the commitment to meet on a weekly basis, and their relationship has gone a lot better since. So they still have to do the work. They still have to continue growing themselves and communicating, but executive coaching definitely sparked kind of this new relationship from within them. So that's one. The second one is the emerging leader category that Paulette was talking about. There was a young high potential. He was a regional manager at Finish Line, and he was doing very well. He lives out in Ohio, and he wanted to make a career change, and he really wanted to get into insurance and be an agent, an owner of an agency. And so he was looking through what it would take to get his license. He was looking at buying a book of business from someone who was retiring. And he told me after the coaching, he said, Michael, if we would have never had some of those those deep, heartfelt sessions and some of those questions that you asked, I don't think I would be here. And now he's one of the
Mm.
largest agents in all of Ohio. So yeah, it just goes to show you the power within coaching if it's taken serious and if the timing lines up at the right time.
Yeah. That goes back to your former versus the latter. Like, yes, professional development. I love it.
I love that. Well, I think one of the important aspects about coaching is the fit with the right coach. Not all coaches, it's not cookie cutter. You really have to have that relationship and find somebody that you vibe with and has the same sort of style or fit for you, but then yet still challenges you in different ways. So, how would each of you describe your coaching style?
So I was thinking about this, and if I have to put it into kind of three words, which is hard to do, holistic is probably the first word. So yes, we look at what you would think an executive coach. We look at leadership, we look at behaviors, we look at what you're being asked to do and how you're leading your team and coaching and feedback and all of that stuff. But we also look at like well-being and how are you showing up mind, body, and soul the best that you can at work. And so sometimes that gets into topics that maybe are a little unconventional to executive coaching, but I think in today's day and age, with all of the stress and how we're bombarded with technology, it's so important for leaders to hone those skills that make us most human. And that leads me to kind of my second point, humanistic. So I've always been a people person, and I always come at coaching with a very compassionate lens. And I understand that people have a lot of complexities in their lives, and it's okay if they're not perfect. They're going to get met with, empathy, but then also when needed to be the accountability and saying, hey, we both agreed that you were going to do this, you didn't. And so you got to find that sweet spot. And then the third one is something that I mentioned earlier, temporary. It is a temporary engagement. If I'm doing my job as a coach, I shouldn't be around forever. I
Mm,
shouldn't. I should help you get to a point and you should be able to go from there. Now, maybe there would be after a few years, you'd want to re-engage in some coaching and you have some new goals. But as much as we might love the relationship that we formed together, it's not sustainable to do it forever. You need to have a starting and an ending point.
yeah, very good point. Paulette, how about you? How would you describe your coaching?
I've given this a lot of thought as I have developed my style as a coach. And I think it's part mentor, part coach, to be honest, because I'm a storyteller and I draw on my own experience a lot. And sometimes I'll say, let's read this book, or here's an article, or watch this video. And so it's got a little sprinkling of some mentoring as well as more traditional coaching, which is asking really impactful questions and inviting people to self-reflect more. So I think that I ride that line a little bit between them.
Mhm.
And you had asked about establishing relationship. I invite people to try at least three sessions before we determine if this is a good fit and we want to move forward. Because I think the first time we're just getting to know each other. The second time we're setting up some more goals because often I'll do the disc, which is more of a work style. How do you get along? How do you resolve conflict? How do you lead change? And in fact, they have one specifically, not just for individual contributors and leaders, they have one for sales individuals as well. And so that can be session one, session two, and session three, we're starting to make the progress and do a quick pause and say, okay, let's check in. Do we want to continue? So I like Michael's word temporary. When people ask me, I say minimum of three, maybe on the higher end of 6 to 12, so it just depends on what are their goals and is it finite? I have one person who wanted to be a better public speaker and then, or is it more complex
Mhm.
with their goals?
Yeah, that's great. And so for if I'm somebody that is a decision maker within an organization, how would you describe the benefit of providing something like professional coaching to individuals within my team? What would you say would be in it for an organization? Paulette, we can start with you on that one.
Sure. I've seen a lot of increased communication. That's probably the biggest one. A lot of effectiveness in resolving conflict and addressing it. I think a lot of people are conflict avoidant. And so how do we make it disarming and comfortable, and be brutally honest without the brutality? The more candor and kindness and compassion. Um, and even studies are showing the return of investment is 5 to 7% of the cost of the investment of training because people are retained, people get promoted, and then all of those communications things.
Yeah, those are
Michael.
some good ones. I definitely have seen the communication piece, leaning into those difficult conversations, especially in the Midwest, because we're sometimes maybe passive aggressive and we don't lean into the conflict, right? But it's so important to leadership. I would say, in addition to some of those transformative aspects, there's a shift I've noticed just in kind of the attitude. Sometimes throughout leadership, you kind of get beat down throughout your career, and to have the opportunity to work with someone else and kind of boost that confidence within you, it gives you kind of a breath of fresh air going back into the office. And I will also say that those individuals who do receive the coaching, they show a high level of gratitude back to the organization because the organization believed enough in them to invest the time, money, and energy into the coach. And it was done in a confidential manner, right? That they trusted that you were going to work. Now, sometimes we'll have an alignment meeting on the front end or a debrief meeting on the back end, and we'll keep the stakeholders informed. But in terms of just saying, hey, go work with this coach, discuss whatever it is you need to discuss with them, it just makes that person feel like they're valued there. So then you're going to see, I naturally assume higher engagement, higher commitment, less likely to turn over, after a coaching engagement.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that because I've heard both of you throw around the word confidential quite a bit in this. And so, Michael, can you just talk a little bit more about that piece of it and how you set the stage with that up front with the supervisors and anybody else within the organization?
Yeah, so really, Paulette mentioned a good kind of precursory step, which is kind of a chemistry call or making sure that there's a good match. So you need that absolutely. And then in addition, what I've found successful is having kind of an alignment meeting with the stakeholders. Now, so these are the people who have noticed, some of the behaviors that they want corrected, or they're the ones who are investing in this high potential. And so let's all get together on a 30-minute call and say, okay, the coaching engagement's going to last 3 months or 6 months or whatever it's going to be. What are the true focus areas so we kind of have the guiding principles and the true north up front? So we can align on those, which makes our job as coaches easier too. So we're not going off on tangents and just we actually know what the objectives are. Then the confidentiality piece happens, in those sessions in the middle. And sometimes, like Paulette said, you're asking deep questions and you're pausing and you're waiting for the reflection. Sometimes there's tears during coaching calls. Sometimes there's just breakthroughs, and they can be tears of joy or they can be tears of sorrow. But it's something clearly that that person is working through and coming out on the better end. So all of that, if we're doing our jobs as coaches, is we're creating the safe space that people can let it out. Because if they don't there, maybe they never do, and then they hold that resentment in, right? So that's what I mean by confidentiality there. And then in the back end, during the debrief, with the same stakeholders who help set the agenda kind of up front, we don't go into those personal stories, right? We keep those confidential, but we do go over, hey, we covered topics, X, Y, and Z, and these are some of the behaviors that hopefully, you've observed have been changing. And also, here's the action plan. And can you be the sponsor now that the coaching engagement is done to make sure that this action plan is carried through and kind of be that coachee's cheerleader now moving forward internally within the organization?
Great.
Mhm.
Paulette, what are your thoughts on confidentiality in coaching?
Yeah, I think it's really key and important to create that psychologically safe space so that people can speak freely about their opinions, their thoughts, their beliefs. And like Michael, we set up the goals sometimes collectively. If they're referred by their supervisor, I literally have a worksheet where I say, why are we here? What's bringing us together? What do you hope to achieve in our time together? What are the obstacles and the barriers getting in the way? And maybe we get to the actions at that point, or that's part of the evolution of the coaching. It depends on how prescriptive they come into the request. So then I often say I would like the coachee to be the one reporting up and reporting out their progress. And I really leave it up to them. I also will say that, and I let the coachee know this. I, your boss who's hiring me or processing the payment, if you will, I will say to them, you are or are not receptive, and you are or are not making progress. So I really keep it a high level. They know what the goals are, but if they want to share, I might encourage them, have this conversation, share this out. But really, I just try and just give some high level, yes, they're engaged, and yes, they are or are not making progress.
That's great. I could talk about professional coaching for hours because there's so many layers to it and so many benefits, but we are running out of time. So I do have one more question for both of you. And is if you could put some sort of coaching insight or one message that you want somebody to know about professional coaching? What message would you put on a billboard or shout out from a rooftop to make sure people know?
It is a safe place to think, learn, and achieve.
Love that.
That is
Michael?
good. I kind of have two. So one is more philosophical, and then one is kind of more like going with the billboard, like if you're trying to advertise or sell coaching. So the philosophical one is don't die with the music inside of you. So as a leader, like make sure that you get out what you need to get out of it in your career and in your life. Tap into that piece because life is short. But from more of a like an advertisement standpoint, I would say something like, the best leaders have coaches. Do you? Because
Mm,
I really think that people who take their job serious and they want to be the best executives they can be, they know they can't do it alone, so they invest the time, money, and energy into coaching. And I think if people start thinking about that or sell that on a billboard, they'll be, you know what, maybe I do need a little bit of coaching. So there's two answers for you.
I
mhm.
love it. Well, I want to thank you both for chatting with us about professional coaching with NICC and our business and community solutions. So if you are watching this and you're thinking professional coaching might be something you want to explore or maybe bring into members for your team, feel free to contact us. You want to give our director of contract training, Amy Green, a call. Her number is, I want to make sure I get this right, 844-642-2338, extension 3130, or you can email her, and her email address is green, GREENA, at nicc.edu. Michael and Paulette, thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.